What's up, everybody? Welcome back. We got another episode of The Strange Road for you. I'm your host, Mikey, and of course, riding shotgun, Bub, the bro host. Bub, how we doing?
Great.
Good?
Great.
Yeah, awesome.
Really good.
We're ready to
Real
go
good.
then.
Yeah.
Well, we got Stoner and Disbro and Master Control with us. As always, everything's looking and sounding better and better each episode. We're adding a little bit more, refining the process, and we hope you guys are enjoying. Check out that Master Control shot. Everybody.
Oh, yeah.
Wave to the camera, fellas. There he is. Look at that. That's great.
I'm waiting to see like a disco ball in there and them like throwing a party while the show's happening. Like, what are they doing back in Master Control?
We can add some more lighting effects and some disco balls and whatever else we want.
That's funny.
Well, let's hop right into it. This episode is going to be pretty exciting because the guest that we have tonight, we actually met at Frogman Fest in March. Yep. Jeff invited us out. Jeff Craig from Map in Black invited us out to help out in the AV room, and so we were helping out, and we got to meet Tobias, we got to meet James Willis, we got to meet B. Mills, and a whole bunch of other people, and here we are. This is going to be an awesome episode, and our guest today is Tobias Wayland from Singular Fortean Society.
Yeah.
Tobias is an author, researcher, has been on several shows like Expedition X through the years.
Nice.
Many podcasts, radio shows. We've actually covered Tobias's SingularFortean.com several times on the Strange Happenings. So if you guys ever go back and see those, you'll see some of those great articles that Tobias and his wife Emily have written. And without further ado, Tobias Wayland, Singular Fortean Society. What's up, dude? How are you?
Hey, I am doing real well. How are you?
Fantastic, man.
Doing
Thank
good.
you. Thank you so much for doing this and making the time to be with us. This is great. And Tobias, just tell us a little bit about yourself and, you know, how you got down this path of creating Singular Fortean Society. And is it something you've always been passionate about? But we'd love to know more about you for our audience.
Sure. So, I like to think that I would be a pretty normal, if a little nerdy guy, if it wasn't for some of the experiences that I've had throughout my life. It really started when I was a very young child, right? Some of my earliest memories, and I'm talking about from age 2, 3, 4 years old. So really just fragments of memories, were being terrified to go to bed because I knew at night like something was going to happen, something was coming for me, right? And I would remember waking up to the feeling of like something digging into my ribs, or feeling like I'm being picked up or carried out of bed.
What?
Or having the blanket pulled over my head to see what looked like hands sort of pressing in on it from the outside. And that was terrifying. And if that had only happened when I was a child, I think it would be very easy to write off. But those kinds of experiences continued. They continue today, really. And so, there were other phenomena, seeing shadow people or hearing strange voices, those kinds of similar things. I can give you an example of something, well, relatively recently. This was, and I'm honestly shocking myself now because I just realized this was like 20 years ago. But it feels like it was much more recent. I was in my early 20s, which again, how depressing is that to think that was 20 years ago? But
I know what you mean.
I was right. I was in my early 20s, and at the time, I was living with my parents. I had moved back home briefly, and I went to bed normally one night, and I remember waking up, and there was no obvious reason for me to be awake. There's no obvious stimulus that should have woken me up. And we lived in the suburbs of Sun Prairie, Wisconsin, for anybody who happens to know where that is. And because we lived in the suburbs, there was always some light. There's ambient light from outside. And so when I looked around my room, I could make out everything that was supposed to be there in the ambient light coming in through my window. And so, I saw my dresser, like my weight bench, my bookshelves, all of that stuff was there, but my perspective seemed off. It seemed skewed. And it took me a second to realize that the reason for that was because I was floating several feet above my bed, and I wasn't paralyzed. I could move, and I was moving my head to look around me, and it just seemed like in that moment it probably wasn't a great idea to move too much considering my circumstances. And so I turned my head to my left to look around, and I see next to me this shadowy human-like figure. It really looked like the silhouette of a human man, but without features, right? Just completely black. And I had the distinct impression that I wasn't supposed to be awake for this. And so I look at this thing, and it reaches its hand out and places it on my chest. And I always sort of interpreted that as being comforting, but I don't really know what its actual motivation was. And when it did that, I was lowered back down to my bed, and it just vanished. Now, at that point in my life, because the next question I always get is, well, were you freaking out? And then usually, why weren't you freaking out, right? At that point in my life, I knew that there was no point in waking anybody up. Like my parents weren't going to do anything. Really, that just leads to like grumpy parents, right? Yep. And so if I was going to be hurt by then, I would have been. It wasn't scary.
Can I ask
in that sort of
Can I ask something real quick, because that makes me think. So we always say that kids are more sensitive; they can see the ghost and what this and that. Do you think it's that, or do you think it's maybe as adults we're just like either A, you're like, why am I going to tell my parents? What are they going to do? Why am I going to tell them? You digested it yourself. You didn't have to go to your parents and go, did I just see the boogeyman or this? Like, do you think that that's a possibility of why? Because that's a common theme, I feel like, that you hear is like, oh, kids have this perspective and they're untainted and this and that, which, yeah, to some degree I agree with, but it just seems, I've never heard somebody say it before because it just clicked in my head of like, I've had an experience, but the only reason I talk about it is because we do a show like this. I don't go tell everybody because like, what am I going to do with it, right?
I think that you are exactly right. I like to say that everybody is about 3 beers away from telling me their paranormal story, honestly. Because, well, I think that. As we... Thank you. I think that as we age, we are encouraged by society to sort of put away childish things like seeing ghosts or believing in monsters, that's something that rationality and the mainstream scientific paradigm under which so many of us live tells us is inappropriate for us to care about as adults. And so if you see something like that, you're supposed to dismiss it. And if you don't dismiss it, then there's something wrong with you. Now, I don't agree with that, but I think that that is probably why we don't get more open reports from adults. Now, another thing that I hear from witnesses quite often, and I think this sort of reinforces that point, is, they'll have this impossible experience, right? Maybe they'll see Bigfoot or Mothman or a UFO or a ghost or whatever. It doesn't really matter. And it's impactful. It really makes a big impression on them. And we're a social species. We want to talk to each other, right? Mm-hmm. Like we want that connection. And so the first thing that they'll do is they do want to tell somebody about it. And so they'll go to a loved one, could be a spouse or a parent or a close friend, whatever. And they will tell them about this experience, this powerful experience. And the number one reaction is that they get laughed at. Mm-hmm. And it is heartbreaking. And then they don't want to talk about it again. And they don't until they meet somebody like us that seems normal enough to talk to, who will actually take them seriously. Yeah. And so I think that is a way that society reinforces that standard, like shame is a powerful motivator. And so when people are shamed by the people that they trust more than anyone, it has a huge effect on them. So yeah, totally. I do think that that's a big reason.
That is a very poignant take on it though, too, the actual complete workings of it, because I wouldn't have thought of that, but it does make sense of like if you saw something like a Sasquatch, you're telling somebody immediately. But you're gonna tell somebody like me or Stoner or whoever that's gonna be like, oh yeah,
I wouldn't run
my
to
God.
the paper.
Well, no.
Or,
But like Tobias is saying, usually people confide in somebody they know.
Yeah, exactly.
And that person maybe doesn't share the same beliefs or even care about the same things. And they're like, you saw a UFO. Oh, who cares? Go get the laundry out of the dryer. And you're like, my life just got turned upside down and I'm questioning everything now. And I just that's a weird juxtaposition that I feel like I've been in those scenarios, not with seeing something strange, but just how my mind works and trying to explain to people when I'm excited about something that they can't grasp. Usually Mikey is the one that can understand that, which is why we've been friends for so long. But it's an understandable feeling because I myself, I know who to give things to. I know who I can tell things to.
Yep.
Or if I'm just wasting my breath. I've learned that over the years because of interacting with people through work or whatever social situation. I've understood that quickly. But to your point too, I think when I was a nurse, I just always had that face where people would tell me whatever. Like I had a therapist face for them or something. And I don't know what it was, but maybe it was because I honestly listened, but I would get all these wild stories all the time. And I'm like, why is this happening to me? Do I have a sign behind me or something where people are like, just come tell Justin like the craziest things? As well.
When I worked I used to run a cell phone store and people would tell me so many things.
Everything.
I'm like, why are you telling me this? This is so personal. What is going on?
Right.
It's like, am I an armchair therapist for you right now? I need to get paid a little bit more for this.
Honestly, maybe that's a space that needs to be filled.
Yeah.
A cryptid therapist, a paranormal therapist, that person that you can go to. It's like, Jesus, maybe we're missing a big swath of data collection by not doing that.
Well,
giving people anonymity and going, hey, look, I'm not going to laugh at you. Come in and talk to me.
Well, the Confessionals podcast, Hollow Skies Night Shift, is kind of a platform for people to tell their story in a safe space.
True enough. That is the therapeutic kind of
Merkel's kind of
going on to it.
Kind of a therapist, a cryptid therapist, if you will.
Well, I don't want people to die with these stories.
Yeah.
What if we never heard about Roswell? What if we never had Bob Lazar come out and talk about Area 51? What if we didn't have the UFO thing today? What if people just kept their mouths shut?
David Grush.
I'm just saying, like, that's a really impactful thought, and the amount of people that don't come forward is just, it's got to be staggering. Because the other thing, Tobias, is we want to know, like, at least me personally, like my experiences, I'm trying to validate them against another rational experience that lines up, and I found them. So I can correlate and corroborate, yep, I'm not out on a whim there. Your experiences. You can probably find similar experiences to people going, hey, I was floating out of my room and they were, you know what I mean? Like,
I've heard that before.
It's really rare that there's going to be a one-off, unique, only happen to one person type thing. It's just
get back to your experience because there was so when you were floating up in the air, you turn your head, you see this figure. And then, is there a point where you remember coming back down on your bed, or what was kind of
laid him down?
Yeah, so I'm looking to my left and I see this thing and it reaches its hand out and it puts its hand on my chest. And at that point, I'm lowered back down.
Wow.
And as soon as I'm back down on my bed, it just vanishes. And it's just gone. Now, interestingly enough, and this kind of goes to your point too about how different adults process these kinds of phenomena. Years later, I am in Ohio for my cousin's wedding, and my brother and I, after the reception, because it ended a little early, so we decide we're going to go hit the bar, get a few drinks, whatever. We didn't have anything to do, and so we're drinking at this bar, and this is not something that I ever spoke openly about with my family until I started doing it professionally. And so I think I was just the right amount of buzzed where I was like, hey, man, have you ever had anything weird happen to you at mom and dad's house? Is it just anything weird? And my brother, who's not into any of this stuff, doesn't care about any of it. He's a scientist. He works in a lab by trade. Mm-hmm. And, he was like, now that you mention it, there was one time when I woke up in bed and I looked over and there was like this shadowy man, like this shadow man standing next to me. But I assumed that I just had to be dreaming. So I saw it and I just rolled over and went right back to sleep.
Isn't that funny?
Yep.
Yeah, and I was like, "You gotta be kidding!"
The scientist.
I didn't tell him, but I was like, "My God, like that's
Wow.
that's some interesting corroboration."
I mean,
Very much.
my brother Jordan sleeps so heavily, the ghost wouldn't be able to wake him up. He might have been haunted as a child every day and never knew it. But I was the type pulling the covers over my head. So it's even at that age of the difference of like your brother's like, oh, I just didn't care. I figured I was just dreaming. I'm going back to sleep. Like, no, I'm running out of the bed probably. Like at that age, I'm running.
But so your house, you wouldn't say it was haunted. What would you say? Like this was kind of like a one-off, or well, obviously it happened twice that you know of with your brother.
Well,
but theories about the house itself or the property.
I wouldn't say the house is haunted so much as maybe I am. Because this is the kind of thing that's happened.
I don't mean to laugh, but
everywhere.
We just had a guest that talked about his mom and literally said that exact same thing. He's like, my mom's haunted.
She's a
not
haunted
the
woman.
House. She's a haunted person.
She's a haunted
and
woman.
all these things happen to her, but nothing happens to me or anybody else. But still to this day, there's all these things.
To the point of her new husband, when she moved in with him, he was like, yeah. Like when she came in here, stuff started happening. So I think you're right. You're the kind of magnet conduit, transistor of strange, You're the gateway for it.
Right. Well, it's something that I've encountered since when interviewing other witnesses. This was another sort of interesting corroboration. I spoke to a woman named Olga up in Rogers, Minnesota. This was a couple of years ago. And she wanted to tell me about this shadow person sighting she had in her house. And it turned out after speaking to her that the phenomenon was sort of centered around her grandson, also named Toby, actually.
Oh, wow.
That's a weird sort of synchronicity, right? and so the phenomenon was sort of centered around him in a way that she didn't, I think, immediately recognize, but made a lot of sense to me after I had spoken to her. So basically, just to sort of sum it up, she saw this shadow person walking upstairs one night, and it was sort of going towards her grandson's bedroom. So naturally concerned, she runs upstairs after it. It's nowhere to be found. He's sleeping soundly. The next morning, he crawls into bed with her, which is not unusual. He was maybe, I think, 4 or 5 when this was actually happening. So he crawls into bed with her, and she gets up to go to the bathroom so she can get the day started. And he comes just hauling after her, like just sprinting, right? And she asks him what's wrong, and he says that there was this monster with red eyes sort of staring at him, and that scared him, and so he had to run after her. And it was later then that he had a sleepover with his cousin. This was some time later, actually. And his cousin is not a sound sleeper. And so during that sleepover, his cousin woke up, as he often did, and he saw this shadow person sort of standing there watching Toby sleep. And it just seemed to be standing there observing him while he slept. And he said that once it seemed to notice him, it vanished. So once it noticed him watching it, that's when it disappeared. And they had other stuff going on where people would see anomalous balls of light. And I don't mean, insects or dust on IR or anything like that, but like with the naked eye, seeing anomalous balls of light, other sort of paranormal or haunting phenomena, nighttime visitations, that sort of thing. But that really stuck with me because it was so similar to what I had experienced growing up and still do to some extent. And it's bizarre, because it's, I guess it's not sort of traditionally scary, right? It's not like a horror movie. Like, oh no, this thing's watching me constantly.
It's
but
just creepy. It's
just
weird.
Yeah, it's that whole voyeur, lurky, weird.
Yeah, why are you watching me, ghost? Like, what's up here? And
Unless you're like standing
me.
guard for me, then I'm down with it.
Yeah.
Maybe it's your guardian angel. Who knows?
There's like something where that spirit's
maybe it's your
to you.
antimatter. Maybe it's another version of you from another universe watching you, or another iteration. I don't know, because I've had that's the encounter I've had was with a shadow person. So that's what I'm saying. I've got a lot of different stories like yours as well that I can basically go, yep, and even like weight, depression on the bed and covers lifting and all that and audible voice and stuff. And so it's like you do have to sit there and go, man, did I just hallucinate all that? Was that I always thought it was sleep paralysis, but I was like, there's no way I'm getting out of bed if I had sleep paralysis, because I was out of that house in like 10 seconds. It freaked me out. I was
falling
ready to
down
go.
the stairs.
Yeah, I was ready to go. But kind of did the same thing. What do? I got to go back to bed. I'm going in my house. Like, who am I going to call? The cops? Like, come get the shadow person.
What are they going to do?
Yeah.
And that's something that people almost never do anymore. Like nobody calls the cops, nobody goes to a newspaper, anything like that. Although I wanted to say, and you sort of touched on this, there are a variety of narratives that can be applied to these phenomena, specifically shadow people. Like you see so many people sort of just overlay their own personal bias on that particular phenomenon. To some people, it's a ghost or a spirit. To others, it's an alien or an interdimensional being or a demon or who knows. I have a personal story about that. My sister, once I started doing this, came to me once and she said, I saw one of those shadowy beings in our living room. It was at my parents' house, and she was like, I really think that it was grandma coming back to visit me. And I don't think it was. There's no evidence to support that whatsoever. Right. Like, I would love to believe it, but seriously, right? But I didn't tell her that. I couldn't. I was just like, you know what? Maybe. Yeah. Like, I'll give it a maybe. Right. You never know. Right. But that's what happens is people have these experiences and they'll say, oh, I saw a ghost, so if and they don't know that that's what they saw, but that's what they overlay on top of the actual experience. So when somebody comes to me, they'll say, I saw a ghost or I saw Bigfoot or I saw an alien or something. And I'll say, hey, slow down. Tell me what you actually saw. Like, what did you experience? And then we can get into, was it a ghost? Was it an alien? Whatever.
Right. Kind of funnily get into the right category after that, or kind of like we said earlier when we were talking about the Loveland Frogmen and how it's like all these stories coalesce into one. It's really not a representation of each individual story. It's like an amalgamation, right? And with trying to go, well, it's ghosts. Well, is it a shadow man? Is it a this? Is it a, is it a doppelganger? There's a lot of variety and flavors of ghosts.
People are trying to relate to the closest thing that they have that they're aware of, and ghost is just at the top of the list.
Yeah, it's the buzzword.
It's just like, well, I can point my experience to something that if they're not into this stuff, you know what I mean? Somebody like Tobias has that same experience.
The mirrored men and things like that I've never heard of. I wouldn't even know what to categorize certain things. I only know because I listen to the stories of this
encounters,
stuff.
They look like they're see-through. They have this kind of like translucent kind of visibility where it's like kind of halfway,
the predator thing?
Halfway in between this world and that world. Yeah. And if you didn't know what you were looking at, maybe that looks like a ghost.
Yeah. Well, that's a good point. Maybe it's an ET and you're just seeing like this wavy, kind of like maybe that's where the sheet kind of like ghoulish outline came from Ghost of Old, the white. Maybe it's some kind of cloaking device. Who knows? Right. But I agree with that take on it. It's tough to pin it down until you go, hey, just give me the story. Yeah. Let's go through it and let's digest this, and we can kind of put a bow on it at the end, or pin the tail on the donkey.
Definitely. I mean, even trying to categorize something, period, it gets very murky very quickly, because you say, okay, well, and like we want to categorize this as a ghost or something. Well, what the hell is a ghost?
Yeah.
Like is it? Are you seeing into a parallel universe? Are you seeing a different time? Is it actually a persistence of consciousness, post mortem? We don't know. And so a lot of times when somebody will say something like, oh, well, I saw a ghost, you're really just explaining one mystery with another, which I don't find particularly helpful, in actually understanding their experience.
Yeah.
So it can be very tricky. Like my wife and I both had full body apparition sightings in the middle of the afternoon in our old neighborhood. Well, it was the weirdest thing because if there hadn't have been anything unusual about it, I wouldn't have known, so basically what happened was I was out walking our dog one afternoon, totally normal afternoon. It was a nice sunny day. And the thing about our dog Bullet is he's very, very friendly. He's very, very excitable. And so at the time we lived in Madison, which is a good mid-sized city, and we lived in a very popular neighborhood. And so there was usually people out, and if somebody snuck up on him or, he just walked past somebody, he always wanted to get friendly. And I'm not that extroverted. And so I usually was not into that. And so, he was sniffing around one of his favorite telephone poles on the street corner, and I'm sitting there. I got my head on a swivel, looking around to see if anybody's coming while he's going to do his business. And I look to my left, and I see this like middle-aged woman with shoulder-length brown hair, glasses, in like a pink, jogging suit. She's got a pink headband on, and she's sort of power walking towards me, And so I look at her, and I'm like, oh God, he'd better hurry up. So I glance back down at him. I couldn't have glanced at him for more than a second. And I glanced right back up because I want to see how quickly she's gaining on us. And so I see her, I glance down, I look back, and she's gone.
Whoa.
Just vanished.
Wow.
Yeah. And so I'm like, there's no place that she could have went. I took Bullet and I crossed the street quickly, and then I walked the direction she was coming from to see if maybe she had like ninja rolled into a bush or something. But she was just gone.
Right. Now you said pink tracksuit and
ninja rolled
headband.
into a bush.
Are we talking like 1980s?
Yeah. What was the aesthetic
suit?
of the clothes?
Yeah.
Time period appropriate?
It was. I mean, honestly, I could see somebody wearing it today. It was like one of those, like, those pink, like kind of like fuzzy, kind of like
velour tracksuits. Like velour.
Yeah.
Yeah. And it's like, it had like the, like they'll have like the white stripes down the, down the side and everything.
Yeah.
Like, it was one of those, which wasn't like the weirdest thing ever. It didn't seem particularly out of place because I lived in kind of a weird neighborhood.
Okay.
Is it a portal that you're looking into, another timeline? All of a sudden she's there and she's not?
I got to bring this up.
Maybe she saw me and I vanished.
You just like hit something. You just hit something in my brain.
Oh man, that just
I didn't even
mind.
think. I've never heard somebody say a story like this and say like,
maybe she saw
this just kind of freaked me out. No, okay. I was on my front porch a couple weeks ago. I'm on my laptop doing work, and my dog's out there with me, and he hears everything. So we hear this like clicking, this rhythmic clicking. We're like, what the hell is that? And I look across the street, and there's this gentleman coming down the street with a walker, like, with the little 3 nubs on the bottom, and it's like, and he goes up to this house across the street, and he starts picking up Amazon packages and walking away, and I'm like. So I sit up. I live in like downtown Columbus area, right? Like there's a lot of foot traffic, so porch pirates, what have you. I was like, hey, man. I was like, I don't think that's your stuff. He's like, oh, no, I was going to take it around back. And I was like, I don't think you live there. Well, he comes off the front of this porch. He walks down the sidewalk. There's a fence there. He turns left at that fence. Now, I'm still watching the road because the only place he can go is out to that road. There's a house there, and then there's these garages and this and that. He never came back. So I don't know if he went through the fence line and then like meandered through these backyard, but to his point, like, I bet I sat there for like 10 minutes and then I started getting concerned, like, where the hell this guy go? Is he breaking in the back of this house? Yeah. Like, so I went and walked over. Look, I saw no trace of him. I was like, that's one of the strangest. But until you said that story, I would have discounted that. I probably in another 2 or 3 weeks would have forgotten it. But now it's kind of freaking me out.
Like,
well, I'm glad I was here to do that.
It is freaking me out a little bit because I really don't know where he went. Like, you're like, what, did she ninja roll into the bushes? Because I was like, is this the most athletic dude with a walker coming down the street that I've ever seen? Like, is he trying to throw me off? Is he really like, very like he's athletic, doing parkour off the roof or something? I don't know.
Right.
Dude, I don't know. That's really strange.
It's bizarre. Well, like I was saying, cool. I didn't have that kind of interaction either. Like you actually spoke to this guy and he responded.
He was real.
Yes. And then just disappeared. Yeah. That was so strange.
Right.
And you said
that's not the kind of thing.
Oh yeah. Go ahead.
But I was just going to say.
Yeah. But my shadow person also talked to me.
Okay.
Like
that's less unusual because that.
Okay.
to me, like there usually is some level of interaction, like I was touched by one, right? Like I can still feel it, but for like a time, yeah, that's bizarre. But for like a time slip or something, like if you actually talk to the guy, I guess what I'm curious about is what it looked like from his perspective.
Sure.
Who did he think you were? Right.
Right. Right. Fair enough. That's so interesting. It makes me think of the holographic universe, and I know I just referenced this the other day, but there's a section in there where you're talking about this, the time slips, right? Like, and these ladies were walking through this garden, and they were in the location of it, and I don't know, was it France? Marie Antoinette, where was she located? Was she French?
Yeah.
It was France.
They were walking through this park that was, a historical area of that, right? And at one point, it was just like they just slipped through like a weird little kind of like almost like a rift or a fog or like something just, and next thing you know, like everybody around them was in that kind of garb. It was that time period. It was almost like, what's that movie with the dog and the little boy, Peabody and Mr. Sherman, where they can go to all the different timelines and hang out? Mm-hmm. They literally just slipped into this like timeline, and they're like, where are we right now? And they were there for a brief period of time, and then it just like shifted again, and they were like back in their time, and they're like, what just happened? Like, it was some of the craziest stuff I'd ever heard. I didn't know things like that happen to people or people experience things like that. But yeah, like you're saying, what's it from his perspective? I'd never even considered that. That is so crazy.
Yeah, man, that's the time slip thing, the peering into different timelines or people popping in and out. I mean, we know there's a multi-dimensional universe. Is there thousands of Mikeys and Bubs doing podcasts in other timelines, slightly different?
They talked about that in the UFO congressional hearings today. Yeah. Of like these, at one point they were asking Grush, I believe, about the. He was basically trying to describe the beings and these pilots of these crafts or what have you. And he's like,
say in congressional record today that they've recovered bodies.
Yeah, and they were interdimensional. He's like, so imagine you stand up and your shadows cast down on the floor in that 2D image, but you're in a 3-dimensional state. Like right. That was the best way he could give an example. And I was like, I can actually wrap my head around that a little bit, but it makes me think of with the paranormal, with ufology, with any kind of cryptid too, that we're still trying to really, again, pin that tail on that donkey. Like maybe we can't. Maybe for some of the stuff, it's going to take a while if we ever can. What if we can't?
Yeah.
What if we can't explain shadow people? What if we can't explain Sasquatch? But we know people are visibly seeing this or have physical evidence of it and damage or, building structures or whatever it is.
Right.
Like,
I think
how do we explain that?
We're building towards knowing so much more right now because it's more acceptable. People aren't going to be viewed as kooks as much.
Fair,
I mean, people that came out with UFO stories were just absolutely discredited and destroyed in the media. Looked like a moron. They get them up on TV. Yeah. They destroy their lives. That is over. You have former intelligence officers, Colonel Fravor, Ryan Graves, all these guys are up in front of congressional on the record talking about these things. And I personally think it's a dam that's breaking to where now more and more people, I mean, the Apollo 15 astronaut that was recently on the show that said we came from ancient aliens. Yeah. He starts talking about, researching the Sumerian texts and experiences he had up in space and how it got him thinking about, all these different things. So
yeah, the vibe is percolating with all of it.
Don't you think, Tobias? I mean, we're kind of breaking through some of these misnomers about paranormal activity.
Sure. I do think that there is more mainstream acceptance for these types of phenomena now than ever before.
Yeah.
Although to that earlier point, when it comes to the possibility that we simply can't ever fully understand these things because we can never entirely perceive them, the easiest way that I found to usually explain that to people is to imagine, okay, so here we are. In 3 dimensions, right? Like we operate in 3 physical dimensions. And what would it be like if we found a 2-dimensional being, right? So I've got a 2-dimensional being here where I can literally pop in and out of their perception at will, seemingly
Yep.
in an impossible way from its perspective, right? So what I'm doing basically seems supernatural, but to me, it's as simple as moving through this dimension that I have full articulation within, right?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And the scariest part, if you're the 2D being, is not only can I do whatever I want, and there's nothing you can do to stop it, but you can never see all of me.
Yeah.
All you'll ever see of me is the part that you're capable of perceiving from within the dimensions that you exist in.
Wow.
That might be one of the freakiest things I've ever heard.
I mean, that totally, when you look at it that way, from the perspective of the person in the lower dimension or the being in the lower dimension.
That is us.
We hear a lot about, we've read The Biggest Secret and the reptilians from the lower fourth dimension and these kind of low vibrating beings that have been coming here and destroying civilization and restarting civilization. They're up in this dimension where, like Tobias is saying, they're coming in and interacting with us.
Well, at will.
But we're able to only see glimpses when they pop through and you see their eyes change. And that's just a kind of a dumb example, but it's kind of the reverse of that.
That was
where if you have if you believe the woo-woo, these higher dimensional beings,
that's what they're saying.
These 6th dimension, angels and these kind of things that you hear about from the Bible.
That's more of an ascription put onto it through maybe the best way they could understand it at the time.
The White Brotherhood material and some of that Blavatsky stuff where they talk about, higher dimensional beings that they were in contact with and could only connect through like ceremonial and psychedelics and those kind of things where you can commune with them. And that's what like rituals and things like that are based off of, and magic and so forth. It's our way of breaking through and communicating with higher dimensional beings.
Sure. Well, that really leads down a whole rabbit hole of weirdness, which I personally love, because then you start thinking about things like consciousness, right?
Yep.
And whether or not consciousness is a force external to us, to the human body, and then whether or not it's capable of existing in other dimensions that physically we wouldn't be able to perceive. And then you can use that to try to explain things like telepathy and other parapsychological phenomena. But also then it starts to sort of make sense with how people describe their interactions with these beings, right? So like to your point of the ascended masters of theosophy, right? So if you're sort of channeling them, right, which is what would happen, and you still see that today, where people will claim to be able to channel these higher dimensional beings. Then what does that really say? Like, if that's true, what does that tell us? Is this some sort of like conscious connection happening on a non-physical level? And then what does that say about consciousness, right? And is it then that the part of these beings that is, sort of capable of being perceived by us is only perceptible on the level of consciousness? And that's why, for instance, like we get so many varied descriptions of beings. Are they not unique, but perhaps unique to us and unique to our perception and our biases and our subconscious that sort of forms in image that we can interact with, based on our own experiences and expectations, and that's why there are seemingly so many, bizarre creatures running around. And you get so many like weird one-off creatures, that aren't ever replicated because they're sort of unique to the perception of the person seeing them at that time.
Kind of reminds me of the theme of
monster
it,
or any
like
of those
where whatever you're afraid of, it comes out as, or whatever you perceive that thing to be as, it morphs into. Like it meets your expectations. They do it in Contact, the movie with Jodie Foster, right?
Jodie
Carl
Foster
Sagan
becomes her father,
her dad, because they're like, we wanted something to be comforting to you and to be able to meet you in this space, and so we scanned your memories and we found out this and we presented this way. The
Netflix series Voltron, the Voltron reboot. That's
so
a
good.
big part. That's a great series. If you guys haven't seen
that's fun,
and you're into like anime sci-fi stuff, wow, they go deep, spiritual, esoteric. a lot of underpinnings of spirituality and technology. It's like very, very interesting.
Dana Carvey and Tina Fey have a new post-apocalyptic alien show cartoon. Like like you're saying, it's bursting through everywhere. It's starting to hit in the pop culture. We've seen it in the movie references, the soft disclosure on that kind of stuff and subject, like Men in Black movies, Independence Day. Like I used to joke that I thought Will Smith was probably an agent because he's in all these movies, kind of making it all right that aliens are here. And one he's defending us, and the next one he's like working for the Ellis Island immigration service for the aliens. So. It keeps kind of seeing like maybe it's the old Bader-Meinhof syndrome, right? Like I go shopping for a pair of tennis shoes that I'm looking for, and now I see them everywhere, right? Maybe it's just we've got it on our brain and we can't help it because we're kind of like junkies for it. But I don't think so, because it's starting to percolate from people that I don't necessarily usually talk to about these things, and like they're giving us like, "Hey, did you hear this?" We're like, "Well, of course I heard that, but why are you hearing this?
Yeah,
why are you talking about it now?" Right? Like,
yeah. And one thing we were talking about earlier with Tobias before we went live was a little bit about John Keel and some of the Mothman stuff. And how, Keel being kind of, doing the work off of Charles Fort, and without Keel, without Charles Fort, there'd be no Keel, and kind of how that the book, The Mothman Prophecies, is sort of this smashing together of all these different experiences. And Tobias, if you could talk a little bit about that and just kind of walk us through that, because you had some awesome points that I wanted to bring that into the conversation, because we're talking about interdimensional beings, or these kind of one-off creatures that maybe are coming in at certain times. And Keel did have some interesting theories about this window of time that kind of opens up at the perfect time, and it's always resonated with me. But
super spectrum,
the super spectrum, and those kind of things. What are your thoughts on, first of all, Keel and his process, and about throwing all those things together?
Well, you can't understand John Keel without first understanding Charles Fort. And so if somebody out there listening isn't familiar with Charles Fort and who he is, he was an early 20th century collector of weird news stories. He would collect all of these weird stories from all over the planet, and he would compile them into these massive volumes, and he would write and sort of speculate about what might be behind them. He would look for connections, and sort of wrote very tongue-in-cheek. He was responsible for concepts like the cosmic joker. That was something that he coined. He speculated that perhaps Earth is a zoo. Interesting fun fact:
enough.
He actually coined the word teleportation. That was Charles Fort. He made that word up to explain something.
All right.
And so he's sort of Charles Fort is to paranormal research today as like H.P. Lovecraft is to horror, right? Like he's this hugely influential figure who, without whom all of your favorite authors wouldn't even exist. Like they wouldn't be who they are. And yet so many people have never heard of him, and they're not familiar with his work.
Right.
One of his most famous quotes, and I like to tell people because I think it sort of sums up what he was doing pretty well, is one measures a circle beginning anywhere. And I've always taken that to mean that by studying any aspect of the paranormal, we can understand something about all of it, because it does seem to be that interconnected. And so John Keel took that idea and he ran with it. He really, really did. And so when he was writing the Mothman prophecies, he included every weird thing that happened in like a tri-state area. And he tried to connect it all. He wove this narrative around all of it, trying to connect these phenomena. And I think what people need to understand is, while we got some really, really good ideas out of that, and he was very forward thinking, and John Keel is definitely somebody who has been very influential, I think, especially in sort of modern high strangeness circles. Just like with Charles Fort was very tongue in cheek. He was speculating. And you had to recognize that about his writing, because the last thing you want to do is just trust it implicitly as though it is objectively true. And that's the same thing with John Keel. While he has these really cool ideas and there could be something to them, you have to also recognize that he is very much sort of tongue-in-cheek weaving this narrative to speculatively examine these phenomena, and you can't take it too seriously. You just can't. It's an interesting thought experiment, but that's sort of where it ends. I like to tell people that guys like John Keel or Gray Barker, one of his contemporaries and friends, they never let the truth get in the way of a good story, and that sounds like a dig, and I get that, but it doesn't have to be.
No, I don't take it as a dig. Yeah,
it's thought provoking. It's thought provoking. Right. You have to know going into it that there is an element of entertainment with any of these guys. And I've always looked at a lot of these things as, you're reading up on it. It's like, I do it because it's fun. I'm not there to disprove a story or try to figure out
poke holes in it.
You want to get as many facts as you can.
Curiosity.
It's just more of like, wow, that's a wild story. And again, we have people on all the time. We're not here to try to disprove any of your personal encounters or anybody else that we've had on. Tom's doppelganger story and some of those. Oh my gosh,
those are good. Well, think of it this way too.
Like, hey, that's your experience.
All the biopics we've watched in our lifetime now, like biopic movies, I didn't realize we were watching that many until like La Bamba or this or that. But, it's like, oh, the story. And you're like, that's how it was. And people are like, whoa, it's a biopic, buddy.
Yeah, it's many liberties have been taken.
Yeah. And so I think of it that now of what you're saying about Keel and Fort, maybe that, and not that they were taking as many liberties as say Hollywood just trying to make $1 million, but they're trying to weave that storyline together. And so maybe they kind of did a Bob Ross and painted a happy little Mothman in with this at the same time.
That's a good point. And kind of what Tobias was saying earlier. Tobias, you were saying John Keel needed an ending. Well, he needed a beginning, which seemed like Injured Cold was the beginning of his story. Then he wraps up the Mothman, and then in the end is
related
the silver
stuff that maybe didn't relate. Basically.
And then Tobias, if you want to talk about that a little bit, about the ending that Keel needed for the Mothman prophecies.
Sure. So, Keel was a very talented natural storyteller, and he knew, I think, that audiences demand a beginning, a middle, and an end. But the reality of these phenomena is that there is no end. There are no neat and tidy endings to these because they never go away. People are still seeing winged humanoids in the Ohio River Valley today. It never stopped.
Yeah.
But that's not a book that is going to make the New York Times bestseller list.
Yeah.
One that has a nice narrative ending, like, say, the collapse of the Silver Bridge. Now that gives people closure. That ties the story together. It makes it make sense on some level.
You're absolutely
when none
right.
of this actually makes sense.
You're absolutely right.
And so I think when that happened, especially upon reflection, because you have to remember that the Mothman prophecies was written several years after any of this actually happened. I think it probably made a lot of sense to him to go ahead and go, well, speculatively, sort of in that Fortean tradition of speculating what's behind these phenomena, just suppose like these things were actually connected, and I'll write it into this story as though like they possibly could have been. But in reality, in all likelihood, the Silver Bridge was a horrible tragedy that had nothing to do with anything other than the fact that infrastructure, specifically bridge infrastructure in this country in the 60s, was horrendous and had needed to be updated for decades.
Yeah.
Yeah, and do you agree? Do you think that the Injured Cold and Woodrow Derenberger's story was John Keel kind of pulled that out as his beginning of the story? To kind of, because he does say that, well, everything started after this incident with Woodrow Derenberger.
It does feel that way.
And he sets it up that way in the Mothman prophecies. Is that just something that he just grabbed a hold of and was like, boom, here you go. This is the beginning of the story.
Yeah, I think it was interesting story and a weird story, and too interesting and too weird to leave out. And
Fair
I
enough.
think that was the beginning of the story to him, but it wasn't the beginning of the Mothman phenomenon. It wasn't the beginning of weird things happening in that area. You know, there had been a long history, really.
Yeah.
But that's the kind of thing where
Chief
if somebody,
Cornstalk.
Yeah, that story. Yeah. It's the Loveland Frogman scenario.
Yeah.
It really is
It's
lumping
on
it all
steroids.
and
Yeah.
pumping it all into one jambalaya of, cryptid
But it's
paranormal
interesting,
happenings.
but,
I ate it up. I love
Woodrow
it.
Derenberger's interview. I mean, you can still watch that on YouTube. I mean, there is like some actual documentation of that story in terms of
what did England say about it? That was interesting. What was he hauling when he got
nitrogen?
Some form of that, like hot dogs, or he was
He had
talking about UFOs and how he has this theory on UFOs coming down and taking
clouds.
nitrogen, and for some reason that's like a part of their makeup, or they need it for some reason. Like he's like, oh yeah, there's like hot dog vendors
Biological
getting their cart
UFOs.
stolen and all weird kind of stuff. Like what? I've never heard any of this.
And then that brought up the
Sky jellyfish.
the movie, the Tremors movies, where the Tremors, and I think it's Tremors 3. They eat nitrogen.
Yeah, and they
Those
eat it in
alien
Stranger
beings.
Things. The people are eating
Stranger
nitrogen. They're eating the
Things.
fertilizer. Like, I look at stuff like that, and I'm always just like, okay, there's that breadcrumb again. There's that breadcrumb
it's
again.
weird.
There's that breadcrumb again. Like, why do I keep getting hit by this?
Right.
And I'm like, oh, I need to notice this. I need to pay attention to that. Why am I getting hit with these weird little things? Like, that's why I stop you sometimes. I'm like, hey, I have to know. Do you think this? Because this is what my brain's doing. And I want someone else to go, yeah, that makes sense to me. It's no different than doing a scientific experiment of like, well, it is a different a little bit way because I can't reproduce these, but I'm saying taking all the given facts, like, is this a logical conclusion? Does it make sense, the whole adult child losing that perspective and things like that, to gain more insight? Because it might make me more inclined to just start talking to everybody going, hey, do you have a paranormal story? You got a UFO story? And really thinking I got a 50-50 shot with a lot of people now. Right? Like I might just start those conversations after that. You kind of unlock that thought process for me. So it's interesting.
you absolutely should, frankly. Literally everybody should, because almost everybody
you.
has probably experienced something weird, even if it's only, thinking about somebody only to have them call a few seconds later, or knowing when somebody showed up at their house before they ring the doorbell. Everybody has experienced something like that. It doesn't have to be as spectacular as a full-bodied apparition or an alien abduction or anything like that. Everybody has experienced something weird that they have written off as something mundane.
Oh, yeah. And I'm sure more than one. But that's the thing, too. And that's why I kind of borrow this from Keel in that sense of like, it was probably when my wife and I first started dating. I'd never had so many synchronicities happen in my life. Of like, I'm reading this book. Yeah, she has that book. Maybe it was just a very good bookseller. Our trip out west, all these different synchronicities that happened on that trip. As we, dated and when we got married, like just... But what I found out was I kept feeling like phenomena of what he says in the Mothman, the movie, and maybe he says it in the book, but of like, he's like, you see that window washer up there? See that guy up on that roof building? Well, he can see like miles down the road. He might know that there's a fire truck coming or that there's a crash that's happened or whatever. He can see the sunset before you. Doesn't mean he has any superpower. He just has, like we said earlier, about that going in and out of dimensions almost. And maybe that's what they're trying to allude to in the film, in that kind of like perspective of showing it and representing it of, again, they're not any more omniscient than you. They can just see things in a different light. So it feels that way. And it, again, being the ones on the other end of it probably at the moment, right? It makes us feel like, oh God, I've never felt more inadequate in my life.
Yeah.
Like, how are we going to defend ourselves if we really have a problem? That was another part of the hearing today. And I hate to keep going back to the ufology thing, but they said so many things of like, they're being asked, could you have engaged with the Tic Tac UFOs or any of these things that you claim to have seen when you saw them, in your F-16s and this and that? And they're like, no. They would have just gotten out of there, or our weapons. Like, do you think they're coming down here looking at our nuclear facilities? Do you think they're probing us?
Yes.
Do you think they're testing our ability? Like, All of the stuff in there
three
across
of them
the board.
agreed
Yes,
on all of them.
Yes.
I felt like in that part of they were trying to drum up some fear, which Congress is great at.
Well, no, but they're
know,
legitimate concerns.
they
With
are
impunity
concerns.
being able to, we can't.
But I was talking to England about this today, Mr. E, and it's if they would have any sort of capability to attack us, they would have did it 50 years ago, and we would be completely
Not necessarily.
wiped off the Earth.
Not necessarily. If you're going to be a species that's intergalactically benevolent,
They wanted to
like,
attack
you
us.
can't
They
just
would have
attack
done
everything.
it. They would have done it.
If they wanted
And they
to.
could have gotten away with it.
If they wanted to. Right. It doesn't mean they're all malevolent initially. I'm just saying, like, what it means is we don't stand a chance in a fight, basically.
No, that's what I'm
They
telling you.
haven't snuffed us out, but it's not to say it's because they're not going to. It's just they haven't decided that we're a problem that they need to address in that manner.
Yeah.
Right now, we can't even really hurt them if that's what the case is.
They just disable our nuclear warheads and do weird things like that.
Yeah. Or just,
Right.
literally fly off into outer space and we can't do anything about it.
Yeah.
Well, it's like this. Why would they ask us for permission to do anything more than we ask the ants on the sidewalk for
Yeah.
permission before we step on their anthill, right? Like, we make it about us. We always make it about us.
Absolutely.
We make this a human-centric issue.
Yes.
When to them, do you think to them it's about us?
I don't.
You know, like it doesn't seem to be like that often. So yeah, I mean, I think the reality is they're going to do what they're going to do. And it's going to be whatever they want.
Yeah.
It's going to be weird. It's going to be inscrutable. And we may never understand any more than those poor ants on the sidewalk
Yeah.
don't understand what that huge boot-shaped was.
Yeah.
That huge boot-shaped thing was that just stepped on them.
Yeah.
Right.
Until they invade your realm and then it's game on.
Well, that kind of brings up
Then I'm going to get you.
one of the Singular Fortean articles that we did cover on the show was the Las Vegas UFO crash.
Oh, yeah.
7-foot tall being in the kid's backyard. And so we after seeing your article on that, we went and dug in a little bit and watched the kid's video and so forth.
Trying to figure out that situation still because it kind of just went away.
It really went away.
Right? Like that story just died.
Do you have any updates on that story?
I haven't seen anything. We were all sort of waiting for that kid to post more videos.
Yeah.
I hate to be this guy, but my sort of take on it now and my initial gut feeling was that it might just be a story.
Yeah.
A lot of the aspects didn't really add up. And so it's looking more and more likely that it was just a story that this kid made up for whatever reason. There's just a lot of really sort of damning evidence towards that. Even looking at like George Knapp's coverage, where he's out there in Vegas.
He showed
and they're
up.
trying. Yeah, like they're trying to interview these people, and the people would keep making these appointments to be interviewed, and then they like wouldn't answer the door, wouldn't answer their phone.
Yeah.
I can tell you from personal experience that is a huge red flag. If you've got this witness who says that they want to talk to you, but then they just keep finding excuses to never ever talk to you, that 9 times out of 10, they are making something up. Like they are not telling the truth. And I think part of it is that they can eventually then say like, well, I wanted to be interviewed, but I just, I kept reaching out to like, say, George Knapp or whatever. And it never came together, and then I just was never interviewed, but I totally wanted to be because this is absolutely real. And I swear it happened.
Yeah.
But it never did.
Tobias, are you planning on going to CryptidCon this year?
I do not. I've yet to be invited to CryptidCon. I would love to go, but no, I have no plans this year.
I think I'm going to have to go. Travis Walton's going to be there as billed at the moment, and David Paulides is going to be out there. And I was going to ask, just because Walton's story is pretty long-standing. I think like Bob Lazar's story, right? The ones that don't waver.
Yeah,
it's been
always
decades,
the same.
and it's the same story.
Consistent.
Do you have any take on the Travis Walton story? Whether or not the veracity, the complexity of it, they've gone back to the site and visited years later, and those trees where they would have been logging have grown up exponentially. Like they're way bigger than they should be. They're like 60-year-old growth when they should be whatever it was, 16 years or something crazy that they said.
Sure. I met Travis once at a conference a few years ago. Well, we were both speaking at the same conference, and he came across to me as a very serious, a very sincere sort of person, right? And so right off the bat, I had a good feeling about him in terms of at least how he felt about his story.
Sure.
Of course, I can't say exactly what happened,
right?
But I can say after speaking with him that it definitely seemed to me like something happened to him that he couldn't explain and had a real impact on his life. And that's something that I really, really look for. And that's always been one of those stories that always seemed the most credible to me in ufology. You think about all of the lie detector tests and all of the work that went in right away, like immediately, to investigate these claims and how they have withstood decades of people trying to debunk them.
Yeah.
I think that speaks towards the veracity of these guys' experiences. Again, like we can't know what really happened, but I think that we can say all of the evidence points towards some kind of real experience that these guys shared, whatever that is, whatever that means. And that's something we can have confidence in. So I mean, I think Travis Walton is an authentic person.
Nice.
Whatever happened to him, he believes it happened.
Oh,
You know
yeah,
what I
yeah,
mean?
yeah.
Like,
for sure.
I watched so many interviews with him, and you just don't get the sense. I mean, the movie that was made, it was a great movie when I was a kid, but if you go back and watch that, it's not even close to what he experienced.
Right.
I
think they tried as hard as they could, or maybe it wasn't a big enough story and they got enough budget to make it.
Until they got on the UFO, on the craft, where he's like digging himself out of all that biological material and then pops out and he's like floating around.
Yeah, it got what? I don't know. I don't know his full description. I've never actually heard the whole.
Really?
No.
Well,
I've listened to it. Actually, I should say I've listened to it. I did listen to that one. I just
Travis Walton like 3-4 years ago.
Again, I just put it in the cup of after I listened to it and I digested it. I believed him, like Tobias said. I don't keep all the receipts of what I believed about him. That's why I'm so bad about when people are like, "Well, tell me why you believe this way." I'm like, I like pizza. Do you want me to break it down to you why I like it? I've been eating my whole life. It's in the bucket of I'm going to eat pizza forever, right? Like that is how I do it. That's how my mind works, and that's how I make decisions. Is because I've done it enough and I like it, or I've done enough and I don't like it, or I've read enough about it and I believe it, or I've read enough about it and I don't believe it. That's just how I work. But again, with his, like, it was just one of those stories where I was like, yeah, I totally. It's a weird one to make up at that time. Yeah, it'd be weird to make up all your buddies in the logging crew. What? How are you going to again? What you're saying with all the testing, that all the lie detector test work, all of the quick investigation work, right? Like, let's just be honest. Like back then, we didn't have as much social media to really disturb people. So in your own little town and burg and whatever was going on, something like this happened. Everybody knew about it. Everybody paid attention, and things got done quickly. National
news.
I know, but I'm saying like. Even if it wouldn't have gone that big that quick, everybody still there would have known about it locally.
And they did. Yeah, because Travis Walton was literally gone.
Right.
He disappeared.
That's what I'm saying.
And then ended up and gave his brother a call, like, I don't know how many days later.
Yeah. And to keep up, say, if it's a lie, are you going to keep up a lie all these years? It didn't help out his life, right? It didn't make him a better career, probably. Like
anybody that comes out with a story, it generally ruins their life. It affects their life in some negative way, whether it's their neighbors don't talk to them, their parents don't talk to them, their aunts and uncles think they're kooks. It's not a good thing. But now I don't think, like we were talking about earlier, it's going to become more and more accepted where, whistleblowers and people that have experiences are going to be.
But if the government already knew about them, if the Eisenhower meeting with the Greys at the Air Force Base actually happened, and there was this partnership, and then you have people like Travis Walton and who knows how many others that were potentially put through these things because there was this already agreement, like that's going to get sticky.
Well, that's the collateral damage that they're worried about now, is because if they did know about all these craft and these beings, and you've known about this, there's injuries, people have been affected by
Careers,
these experiences, there's
livelihoods.
careers, there's
Probably people silenced.
they're accountable,
Yeah.
which is why you have so much collateral damage, why it's taken so long for this to come out,
Yeah.
is because somebody's got to pay for all of these lives that have been affected by
Or they need to die off before they have to pay the piper.
people that have discredited others in the media. I love talking about Mothman, and one of the more less known stories about these Mothman type creatures is we actually learned more on the topic at Frogman Festival from your presentation on the Mothman of Lake Michigan, which I had heard a tiny bit about, but you went into such great detail. I mean, that presentation was so slick and on point. It just blew my mind. So, I mean, I would say you're the Lake Michigan Mothman expert.
Yeah.
Tobias, I've never seen a more comprehensive deep dive than what you gave us. Can you talk a little bit about that and kind of give us I guess an overview of that whole series of events?
Sure. Well, I mean, first of all, thank you. That's really nice to hear. And my introduction to winged humanoid sightings around Lake Michigan, and that is to say, every state bordering the Great Lake, right, began in the spring of 2017. I saw this trio of sighting reports come through the Mutual UFO Network case management system. And at the time, MUFON had written a short article on them. They didn't have a lot of info. And so I picked it up because I was writing news for the Singular Fortean Society, and I thought it would make an interesting little article, sort of tie it into the Mothman sightings from the 60s, and that would be it, right? Well, that's not what happened. As soon as those sightings came out, then there was this deluge of sighting reports. They just kept coming in, and they were coming in with such rapidity that it was difficult to follow. They were coming in mostly to places like Phantoms and Monsters, which is Lon Strickler's blog, and then a website, UFO Clearinghouse, run by a guy named Manuel Navarrete. And so I saw all these sighting reports coming into mostly these two guys. And so I reached out to them separately, and I thought I better interview them. And they both very graciously agreed to be interviewed. And I interviewed them in consecutive months. It was June and July of 2017. And they both seemed fairly forthright in terms of their testimony regarding these sightings and sort of their work investigating them. I didn't see a real heavy bias towards a particular narrative. Other than that, it was sort of weighted towards any number of paranormal explanations rather than a real strict focus on debunking. But, skeptical enough, I think, to satisfy me at that time. And it wasn't too long after that we all sort of figured out how close Emily and I were to the sightings. We only live about 20 minutes north of the Illinois border. At the time, we lived up in Madison, which is maybe like an hour. So we could get to Chicago within a couple of hours either way. And Lon's all the way out in Pennsylvania. And so it was sort of decided that it would be helpful, if we were to join the investigation, and so we did, in which ended up making even more sense because it wasn't too long after I started publishing our articles on these that we started to get our own sightings, and so people would come to us directly, and that was very interesting because that's when it becomes real on some level. It's really one thing to read about a sighting, read about it in a book or an article, or hear someone talk about it, somebody else's sighting on a podcast or something.
Yeah.
But when you are face to face with this witness, and you can see in their eyes the effect that this experience has had on them, to see another adult visibly shaking or sweating because they're so afraid to relive this experience that they've had, it's powerful, right? And so that really brought it all home to me in terms of the importance of allowing people the space to present their experiences as authentically as possible. Certainly I want to explain what I can, but if I can't explain something, then the best thing I can do is support the people who have experienced it.
I love that.
And so that's
great.
Thank you. Yeah, that's what I've been trying to do, for the entirety of this investigation since I've been a part of it. There are some prosaic explanations that do, I think, explain some sightings. For instance, there are a couple of different profiles of sightings. Like the first profile is a daytime sighting of something flying relatively far away from the witness with no associated paranormal phenomena, right? A good example of that is in the spring of 2018. There was a young man who was bicycling to work in the Pilsen neighborhood of Chicago. And he had a bicycle helmet that had a GoPro camera on it. And while he was bicycling to work, he noticed this man and woman on a street corner, and they were pointing at something and looking at something in the sky. And so, naturally curious, he looks up and he sees what he later described to me as either a giant bat or a man in a wingsuit. And he decided. Right. And he decided
it's a big man or bat and wings. That's a big. Sorry, that just broke my brain for a minute. Like, it's either a really big bat or a man in a bat wingsuit. Like, okay, like, all
that's
right.
where his mind went. Right?
Yeah.
And he had this GoPro camera on his helmet, so he's like, I'm going to follow this thing for as long as I can till I have to go to work. And he did. He got a lot of good footage of it, and he was very, very helpful. He sent me the original SD card that the footage was on. With his help, we were able to isolate several good frames that showed this thing. And so we could put that in Photoshop, and we blew it up, and it was a bird. It was 100% a bird. My guess would be something like a great blue heron. Something people don't know about the Chicago area is that due to climate change and the destruction of their natural wetland habitat, herons are actually roosting in urban areas in numbers that we have never seen before.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. And so I think part of what was happening was, people now, I get that people will say things like, well, I've lived here forever, and, I would know if I was seeing a great blue heron flying. And it's like, well, would you though?
Yeah.
Like, would you? Because this is a new
I don't know
thing.
that I would.
City.
Yeah.
Right.
I mean, we have blue herons.
Them.
We have a lot of public parks here in Columbus that have beautiful giant ponds, and you'll see blue herons all the time in our city.
But I think maybe just people aren't so used to seeing wildlife.
Well, we grew up seeing blue herons around the lake and stuff. Out
but
of
if
Grand
something
Lake.
moves into your environment, such as that area, that you're like, we've never had these kind of birds before, and you start seeing them, and be like, what the hell is that? I'd have the same reaction.
They've always had them, but not in those numbers. And I think it was unusual for people to see them flying, honestly, because most of the time, you only see those kinds of birds walking around, like your sandhill cranes. We get a ton of sandhill cranes up here. I see them all the time. They like to hang out in the road. And they're always walking around. You never see them flying ever, unless it's during their migratory period, or you're really, really lucky and they just happen to want to fly to like a new area, to look for food or something.
Right. And not only that, Tobias, but they stand still for hours sometimes, it seems like. I mean, we've seen cranes. My father lives in Florida, and we visited them just for spring break. And we went to the pool. We saw this giant bird, and I'm like, that's a statue. It's not moving at all.
No, they're real.
And we sat there and watched this thing. It wasn't a herring, but it was just some other kind. It might have been a sandbill. I'm not sure, but this thing was huge. We go to the pool. We come back. It's still there. Still sitting there in the exact same position. And I'm like, is that a statue? And I get up on this thing, and it was a crane type bird.
Yeah.
And like you said,
a dinosaur.
You always see them on the ground, though. You hardly ever see them fly. and we were just waiting for this thing to take off. It never took off. So that's a good point.
No, they usually will just sort of walk around and that's it. But yeah, so I think once you have introduced the birds to this area where they already existed, but you've introduced them in numbers that people have never seen before. So all of a sudden you're getting a lot more of these edge cases where people are seeing them flying, which is a relatively rare occurrence outside of their normal migratory period.
Yep.
And so you've got these people who've never probably seen one in the air before, who are suddenly just blown away. Like, what the hell is that crazy thing? And so we started getting a lot of sighting reports based on that. Now, I remember specifically when I was talking to this guy, and I was like, well, hey, I've blown this up. It really looks like it could be a bird. I'm going to send you some photographs of different big birds that I think it resembles. Can you tell me which one you think that it resembles the most? And he picked out the great blue heron. And that was no surprise to me, because based on its profile, I thought that's exactly what it had to be. And then, and this part, it broke my heart a little bit. He apologized as though he was wasting my time,
Oh,
and I had to say, no. Yeah, you have done me a great service here, because of you and because of this sighting. Now I have this evidence that I can apply to all of these other similar sightings. So I know why they're so different than the other sightings. So the second profile of sightings then, of course, are these nighttime sightings of something that couldn't possibly be a misidentified bird if you believe the eyewitness testimony. So I'm talking about something 6 or 7 feet tall with a 12 to 15 foot wingspan, humanoid in shape, glowing red eyes, seen at a relatively close distance, often on the ground before taking off into the air. People do report all kinds of associated paranormal phenomena, be it a seemingly supernatural sense of fear, the feeling of being hypnotized, the feeling as though this thing is staring into their soul. They might have weird, like, haunting phenomena that they're experiencing outside of this particular encounter that they don't necessarily connect, but is still relevant data to me. And so this second profile, again, was happening at the same time as we would get all of these these first profile sightings. It was very difficult for me to reconcile until that Pilsen sighting. And then all of a sudden I said, okay, here it is, Eureka, these are misidentified birds. These are not, and now we know why they are different.
Right. Well, and I think that's also a good mark of any investigator too, is you don't run out there and go, no, you didn't see a blue heron. You saw the Mothman, right? You weren't dummy up, kid.
Trying to fit it.
You weren't John Keel in it. Not that I'm trying to knock him, but you're not trying to stew it into it, right? Which is, I think, what you have to do. You got to come in, even though you want to believe. You can't come in believing, or you're non-objective, and you might as well just write whatever you want then, right? So I think that's so important to come in and really do the work, because what you're saying is so valuable. Now you have a comparison and a contrast. You can go and apply these forward, and it's going to help.
You can eliminate the misidentifications.
Absolutely. And figure out the anomalies and why it might be. And I think people and I'm not a huge fan because they do knock on it so much, but Mick West or Stephen Greenstreet, they are, I think even if a UFO landed on their front lawn, they might still be no, I don't see it, they are the ardent, but they're needed because they're going to keep people in line, from believing everything, because not everything is accurate. Not everything is on point. We got to really be diligent about this because we ultimately just want to understand. And so we can't let it be a flight of fancy, and we can't, dismiss everything. We can't be your brother and rolling back to bed with the shadow person when they're there. And we can't be the person saying there's shadow people everywhere all the time.
Right.
There's an in between.
Look at Michio Kaku. He's recently just come out and said, I was 100% a skeptic with UFO, aliens, extraterrestrials. He's just said, I'm convinced this is a real phenomenon. I'm convinced there are craft.
That's the scientific method.
And he has built up and has been inside a bunch of... He's also frustrated because he keeps getting kind of these insider folks that
Same with
contact
Weinstein.
you, and they bring you along, and
Because they don't want you to ever fully discover, so they kind of lead you on this breadcrumb trail to nowhere, because if you're left to your own devices, you're going to get there. So once you get to a certain level, it almost seems like, of awareness, of intelligence, of understanding, and in those arenas where if Michio Kaku starts going out and saying, hey, I believe this, well, no, instead, maybe they were like, hey, we're going to give you the real story. Don't say anything yet.
Yeah.
Maybe they do that for 5-10 years because, like, we can't tell you this month or that. You understand it's sensitive. It's, that's easy to kind of like sequester people off and be like, here, I'm gonna run interference on this person for like a decade. And I think they're getting tired of it, because Weinstein has said he's had the same things happen to him, where they're like, we're going to tell you what's going on when the time's right. And they're frustrated.
Maybe I was mixing up him and Weinstein. Anyways.
No, could be Kaku as well, but Weinstein for sure.
How many people did you interview for the Lake Michigan Mothman phenomenon? And first, was this a period of a couple years, or is this still happening? Are you still interviewing people? And if so, what was the most unique one where you're like, hey, there's something here?
Right. That's a good question.
Sure. Yeah, this is ongoing. It's like I said, like there are no neat narrative endings to
There's
this
no
story.
silver bridge.
It just goes on. No, there isn't. It goes on and on and on forever, because that's how paranormal phenomena actually works.
Yeah.
Like they just go on and on and on. There's no ending.
Great point.
There's no ending to these sightings, just like there's no ending to, I don't know, weather patterns,
right,
or the
waves
sun
on the beach,
rising and setting.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, of course. Like it just is a thing that happens. It will always happen. And then, boy, how many people have I interviewed? That's a good question. Quite a few. I would say a dozen, 2 dozen probably, that I personally interviewed. Wow. At least that many that I have received like personal info from law on that I could verify, to be able to at least say that, I've seen evidence that this person is who they say they are, so on and so forth. And then, let's see. I'm sorry. What was? I feel like there was a third part.
Just the most compelling story or account that really kind of blew your socks off, where you're like, "Hey, this is worth continuing this trail at least, and keep at this."
There are so many, but if you want an early one, there was a sighting in Mugwanago, Wisconsin, which is it's a rural town outside of Milwaukee, and I went out there with Emily. The witness agreed to let us come out to the sighting area and said he would show us around. And his story was basically that he was driving home one night. He lived with his parents out in this middle of nowhere. Basically, it's a fairly rural area. There are some houses, but otherwise it's mostly woods and farm fields. And he's driving home. And he gets home and he's talking on the phone with his friend. And he's like, well, I don't want to go inside and wake up my parents. So I'm just going to back my van into our driveway. It's sort of a longer gravel driveway, and with a little turnaround at the end. And so he does. He backs in like he always did. He's just sitting there talking on the phone with his friend. And the only light is this lamppost at the end of their driveway, which is about 50 feet away, because I measured it once I got there.
Mm-hmm.
And otherwise, there was no moon or stars or anything. It was cloudy. It had been misting all day, and so he's sitting there, and it takes him a minute. But at some point, while he is talking to his friend, he notices that there seems to be an outline of something standing in front of his van, sort of backlit by this lamp, right? Like the light from this lamp, and so he does what I think a lot of people would do. He turns his headlights on to see what the heck is standing in front of him, right? And he sees what he later described as this, 7 or 8 foot tall humanoid being with these large, like leathery wings. And he described how it was kind of standing there, and it had its wings like wrapped around itself, sort of like how a bat will wrap its wings around itself.
Yep.
And it was staring at him with these big black eyes, and And he's staring at it, and it's staring at him, and he's telling his friend what's happening while it's happening. And his friend is just like, his friend thinks he's full of it at first, thinks he's pulling a prank or something, right? And it takes a second for his friend to be like, wait, are you actually serious? Is this really happening? And as the guy's looking at this thing, he said that it blurred and then it was gone. And so he didn't know if that meant that, it like teleported, or, if it shot up into the air or just somehow moved so quickly that his eye couldn't follow it. I don't know. But it blurred and then it was gone.
What?
And at that point, he was like, well, F this, I'm going to go inside.
I was about to sleep in my van and lock the doors.
No, he runs inside.
Jeez.
Once it's gone. And then, like I said, Emily and I got to go out there, and that story is incredible. Right. It sounds too bizarre to be real. But when you're face to face with this person, and it is a beautiful spring day in Wisconsin,
that's it.
And he's literally like shaking and sweating, telling this story to strangers that he invited over to his home, which is already nerve-wracking enough.
Yeah.
But to see somebody relive that kind of earth-shattering, paradigm redefining fear is all too real. Regardless of what you think happened, it had a real effect on him. Mm-hmm. And that's something that we have to take seriously. And it's because of that, and because of all of the many other witnesses with whom I have personally spoken that have had similar experiences with similar effects, bordering on trauma in some cases.
Oh, yeah.
That's what keeps me going. I mean, that's the reason that I do this. It's why I feel I have to do it.
Yeah. And they're physically showing you that they're upset. They're sweating. They're shaking. I mean,
Well, you can't help those responses because that memory is
body
almost
language is so
tied
much,
to it, right?
If you get good at reading body language, you can really get a sense of this guy's bullshitting me. This person's serious. This person is. There's a fear is coming through. I mean,
there's an authenticity
now, unless they're a complete psychopath and they can lie directly into your eyes and paint
Mr.
this
Ripley.
whole. Yeah, exactly. Those people are very, very rare in society. And the fact that what does this guy, this psychopath, if he is, what does he have to gain? And you start going through this whole process of why would this guy invite me all the way out to his house? He's already freaked out that I'm in his home. It's just like there's a lot of those things that I always think of when it's coming to Bigfoot eyewitnesses and interviews that you see of these people are upset. They're genuinely freaked out. Some people have nightmares for years about these things.
Like he's saying, PTSD, might need to go to therapy. I mean, was it Whitley Strieber? Wasn't he doing some after his experience from the movie Communion? I feel like he was going and trying to
hypnotize
and go through it. And that is, again, like it seems like a lot of times those memories are blurred out or blocked out for a reason, right? Like we probably can't handle a lot of it, or it's not meant for us and in that way. And so that's why it's like kind of like sequestered off and, Dr. Xavier puts a wall around it, so we can't touch it or get to it. And somehow when we go to these sessions of hypnotism, we get back to it. But that's the whole biophysiological feedback too, of when you're talking to somebody that has had a real experience. I feel it's very similar to, like, say you catch a video of somebody biting it on a mountain bike and you viscerally feel that pain of them, right? Because that pain somehow, and your body has that memory of it. So when you're talking to somebody that you think is legitimate because of what you're reading in their body language and their overall affect and appearance, maybe that is because that imprint is really roaring back to life and the memory bank is like firing back up to that state of that time. So in that state, they were probably in the same height, and like their heart rate was probably going off the charts. Like they were probably, very anxious, fight or flight, like adrenaline going through the body. So I would think going back and recalling those stories even, and a lot for like even victims of not even cryptids, but, trauma in life, you see a lot of the similar presentations. If you would hook them up to an EKG or a pulse ox or a blood pressure and have it going, you'd see all those numbers kick off. Even when people are calm, those numbers will kick up. even if they're good at keeping themselves under control and have dealt with what they've experienced.
It takes a lot of training to do that.
Yeah.
To be able to, CIA agents do it. They know how to regulate their body temperature and their heart rate so they can lie directly into your face.
So difficult.
It's either really, really highly trained or you're a psychopath.
Well, just think of somebody flattering you or saying
common.
a compliment and you feel the flush that you can't stop it. And you know your face is turning red and this. I mean, there are certain ways to push those buttons.
Right.
And that's what they know how to stop, which is amazing. But yeah, so for people that aren't trained to do that and just had an encounter and they come up and are talking to Tobias, he's probably, they're just full giving you a report through their overall body language. Body language says so much.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, it like you all said, I mean, it would be seemingly very difficult for someone to fake that kind of impact, and reliving that experience. And, for somebody like me who got into this field because of my own experiences, it really means something to me to be able to just to do my part, to be able to try to help people in whatever way I can, even if that is just being a means of catharsis. So many people come to me and they want answers, and I have to tell them, look, if this is an authentic paranormal experience, then I can tell you some popular theories. I can tell you what some people, think might be possible, but only con men and crazy people are going to tell you that they know the truth about what's happening here. So you need to understand that.
Good point.
I can't say with any certainty what really happened.
That's very admirable again, because there are a lot of people that do think, well, this draws to that, and so this means that. And it's like, until you prove it, whether science does or whether some amateur does, I don't care who does it, but until we can nail down a lot of things, it's like, it's theory, and I'm fine with that. And there can be multiple competing theories, and may the best theory win. But when we get to it, then we have to accept that theory is now put into practice, and it's accepted widely. But until then, I like how you're saying, I can give you some kind of maybe good general directions that it might be going, but I can't give you a definitive.
Mm-hmm.
Right. You know what? Give me 1 second. I can see that I'm losing my natural light here, so I'm fading away like a shadow person.
No problem.
I'm going to turn my light on real quick.
No worries.
Tobias became a shadow person.
Yeah. The sun's going down.
Well, this happened yesterday too. Remember, we were fighting light yesterday
with Zeus and Holland.
Yeah, God dang, that's too funny.
Nice.
Well done. Well done.
Thank you for bearing with me there.
No problem.
Great.
Great job.
I did notice on your. I've been, like I said, we've been digging into the Singular Fortean website for a while now, and I noticed that you guys have a section on your site, experiences. And there's quite a few interesting stories that you guys document. Is there one in that tab? And again, we'll have all the links in the show for anybody that wants to check out.
Absolutely.
Tobias and his
Please
wife
go check
Emily
out
and
his
everything that they've got going on, because it's a great site. And you guys do, and it's a beautiful site. It's easy to get around. It's really well done.
And if you're looking for a good cryptid paranormal fix, go check it out.
But is there anything in that section? You guys did an investigation in a hotel. I wish I had the list in front of me. I guess I could look it up on my phone, but there's a few that I was digging in.
Did because I was like, man, I should look, because otherwise I'm going to forget half of them.
Sweet.
Boy, there's some interesting ones in here. Obviously, my own personal shadow person experience is in there, and that was an interesting one to me. But setting that aside, boy, there have been some fascinating experiences. I think one of the ones, just looking at this list, the Al Ringling Mansion. That's one that I think that might have been one of the first, if not the first, investigation that Emily and I ever went on together. And it was at the Al Ringling Mansion up in Baraboo, Wisconsin, and it's supposedly haunted. And we've seen some evidence that very strange things happen there. And in fact, one of the weirdest and most interesting physical phenomena that we ever experienced was at the Al Ringling Mansion. So Emily and I are there. We're on our first investigation. We're being shown around by this guide, basically, who's taking us to all of these different rooms, sort of telling us the stories behind them. And Emily, she brings her camera because she's a professional photographer, and so she's got her flash and everything because we were shooting inside, and she's kind of behind me and she's taking pictures and whatever. And as I'm listening to this person, I see out of the corner of my eye, like her flash keeps going off, like she keeps taking photographs. And at a certain point, I'm just like, dude, would you knock that off? Right in my face. And I turn around and she's sitting there and she's looking at me totally befuddled. She has her flash disconnected from her camera. There's no batteries in it. And she's just looking at me like with her mouth open, like, I don't know what to do. And the flash, it just keeps going off. Like there's no power source for it. Yeah. And that was completely bizarre. This is the same place that we actually ended up getting married at, interestingly enough. So we got married.
All right. I like how you party.
Yeah, dude.
Right? Like we got married in this haunted mansion on Friday the 13th.
Oh my God.
In October of 2017. So Friday the 13th in October in this haunted mansion.
I'm high-fiving you the next time I see you in real life. Like Jesus, man.
Nice.
That's great.
That's the trifecta.
It was a great experience all around. We ended up becoming friends with the owner. And so when we were planning our wedding, he was like, we sometimes rent out the ballroom here and I'll cut you a deal. And obviously that was a no-brainer for us.
That's awesome.
And so at our wedding, actually, a friend of ours was filming our first dance. Right. And later, after the wedding was over, she sent us this footage and she was like, hey, who's this guy in the background? Like, doesn't he look weird? And we looked at it and there's this pale white, like completely white guy. Like I'm pretty pale, but this guy was like completely like no color, like none. And he kind of walks behind us and then is gone. Right. And we all thought that was weird because nobody recognized him. He didn't look like anybody who's supposed to be there. We actually asked the owner, and he was like, "That dude doesn't work for me. I don't know who that is."
Wedding crasher.
Wedding crasher. I was going to say.
Wilson.
And what was weird about it was Emily took it and she inverted it. And so what she wanted to do was see exactly how pale this guy was. Right.
Okay.
So like basically if the paler something is, the blacker it'll look once she does this.
Yeah.
And so she did it. And so like me, again, like fairly pasty white guy, I was like bluish, which is about as dark as you would expect of, a fair skinned person to get. Mm-hmm. This guy, pure black, completely black, like unnaturally, impossibly pale.
Interesting.
Right?
Think it was Mr. Torrance just checking in on the place?
Yeah.
I don't know, but it seemed like
The Shining.
This person our friend had captured a ghost walking behind us during our first dance in this haunted mansion.
Wow. So especially the timing too, that it was the first dance and it wasn't just like some random square dance or like the electric slide. It'd be kind of funny if it was during the electric slide or something.
Did you? We're all doing the chicken dance.
Was it just the reception there, or did like you guys stay there overnight as guests, or was it just the wedding reception and then you stayed somewhere else?
We didn't sleep there. They didn't have the B&B open at that time, so we had the ceremony there and the reception there, and then we left to go sleep somewhere else.
Wow, that's so cool, man.
That's like the next step for us here would be like, Mansfield prison wedding style. Like,
yeah, I'm not sure my wife would go for that.
I don't know that anybody's done that. I could see people going for that. Well, they have Rock on the Asylum or whatever it used to be. They'd have, people go through there on Halloween. I still have not done that. That might have to happen at some point in my life. Have you ever been there, Tobias, or know anything about that? The Mansfield,
where is it?
Mansfield Reformatory here, and so it's where they did the Shawshank Redemption filming for the film, and it's highly active from what people say. I mean, they do night tours. You can go through there, and like it's a big draw. But like I've heard people like, nope, I'm not doing that again. I'm like, what happened there?
Haunted places in America, for sure.
Yeah, like smelling certain cells, walking by them, smelling like burning Like if somebody had been assaulted or different things, or just a number of creepy things where I'm like, I don't think I'm doing the night tour. I don't know. I mean, I guess I'm still relying on the lights inside there. I don't think they had a lot of windows to shine in for the prisoners, but right. I think I'd still go during the daytime. It feels safer for some reason. I don't know. Just darkness feels like not our element, kind of like water. I don't do good in swimming compared to anything, and I can't see that well in the dark.
Well, I mean, that's everybody. I mean, we are a diurnal species, like we don't have night vision. That's not our thing.
Nope.
Like discovering fire was a big deal for a reason,
Yeah.
So I think that makes sense. When people get scared or they ask me if they're in danger, I usually tell them the same thing that I've been telling myself for years. If whatever these things are, whatever these phenomena are, if we were going to be hurt, we'd be hurt by now, right?
Good point.
And so I don't think that there's really much danger to investigating something at night in terms of the paranormal phenomenon itself that might be present. Now, a building becomes more dangerous at night if you're walking around in the dark because you can fall down the stairs or, bang your head on something.
Yeah.
Sure.
If it's derelict, you can fall through the floor.
Yeah, those are solid points for anybody thinking about going
some
on
old haunted warehouse you get asbestos in.
Have you done any?
Yeah, I mean, you really never know.
Have you done anything like that? Gone out on any research trips of that nature, ghost investigations, or is that any kind of okay?
Yeah, we don't discriminate.
Nice.
We investigate everything, and so I've been to some haunted locations. I've been to the Farrar Schoolhouse out in Iowa. That was interesting.
I'm unfamiliar with
that.
We
did some. It's an old schoolhouse that's basic. Well, like a lot of these places, it's the only thing it's used for now is paranormal investigations.
Yeah.
But yeah, it was a schoolhouse that shut down, and people think that it's haunted. I don't know, and I should ask because I think it was Richard Estep wrote a book on it, and we're going to be at the same conference up in Glen Beulah, Wisconsin, in September. And I like Richard; I've hung out with him before, and we communicate online. And I need to ask him why people think Farrar is haunted, because I honestly don't know. I don't know of anybody who has died there or anything else. Because for instance, let's say you went to the school, even if you really liked the school, when you died, would you go haunt that school?
Right.
You couldn't get me out of school fast enough.
Right. Why would you go back to school where we're all bored out of our minds and teachers yelled at us and got detentions all the time?
Yeah, no.
Right.
We were kind of troublemakers.
Like chariots of fire every summer that they let us out. Dun, 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 dun. Get me out of here.
And yet, despite that, while we were there, we definitely experienced some things that were very unusual. Strange moving shadows, bizarre messages coming through a spirit box. Stuff that's not easy to dismiss. Just offhand, right?
Yeah.
And so that was a very interesting place. Most recently, we went to Broadhead Manor. So that's just north of us. I had never heard of it. I didn't know that this place existed. It's literally 10 minutes from our house. And we found out about it from our friend, Nick Simons. So Nick Simons, he was on that Netflix show, The 28 Days Haunted.
Oh.
And he does a lot of paranormal investigating, of course. And so he told us about this weird, again, it's an old school, I guess, that they were going to have a conference there. And he was like, well, you guys should go to this conference because I'm going to be there. And it's 10 minutes from your house. And that seemed like a great idea. So we were going to go. And he was like, if you want to check it out, I'm going to be up there and we can just, we can have the run of this place because I know the owner. And so we show up and we meet the owner, and he was a really nice guy. And we get to go wander around this reputedly haunted school again, right? And again, it was a very interesting place, and there were some messages that were coming through, spirit boxes and things that were very difficult to dismiss. I didn't see anything like I did at Farrar or any of the other places or some of the other places that we've been at, but but again, it's difficult when you're asking a question and it is answered immediately in a way that can't be mistaken for any kind of like audio pareidolia or something, right?
Sure.
It's difficult to just dismiss that out of hand. So yeah, we've definitely been to some places, and they've been really interesting. I have to admit though, Emily is way more into ghosts than I am.
Yeah.
Usually, like if it's just ghosts, if we're gonna go to a place and it's just ghosts, I'm like, it really just goes like, are you sure that like a UFO never landed there or something like that? Like that's like nobody ever saw a monster that defies everything we know about biology or something.
If UFOs and ghosts start intermingling, then it's really game on. Do you have any pets? Do you have a dog, cat, any animals?
We have 2 dogs, 2 cats, and 1 lizard.
And my question regarding this and why I drove this way, you being the magnet of the weird and the strange and the shadow people, etc., do your animals ever react strangely around you? Do you ever notice your animals acting strange behavior? Because I know a lot of times people have said, and our friend's mother, her 2 dogs and kind of her house and the things that would go on of them just staring in certain corners and being really upset or almost seeming like they were like, they were aware of something. Have your animals ever had anything like that or no?
No, it's interesting that you mentioned that because I've definitely heard of that before, but it's never happened ever. In fact, like at our old place when we still lived in Madison, I had a couple of really bizarre, disturbing nighttime visitation events there. And Emily's sleeping right next to me. Bullet, who was our only dog at the time, was asleep at like the foot of the bed. Neither of them seemed to wake up or do anything.
Wow.
They slept right through it.
Well, maybe they know you've got it under control. And so all the pets are like, don't worry. He's got it. Dad's got it. It's all good.
Yeah,
He's the man.
I'm thinking maybe. I don't know.
This has been great. I want to start kind of leading out into the direction of wrapping this buddy up. But one of our big passions, Tobias, is ancient civilizations in America, mounds, earthworks, ancient sites, and just the fact that nobody knows really the true ancient history of what we have and you guys in Wisconsin in particular, you guys have thousands of ancient sites and mounds. Do you ever have any stories about anything paranormal or UFOs around earthworks or like crop circles? Here we have crop circles that pop up near, say, Serpent Mound and places like that. The 20th anniversary of the Serpent Mound crop circle is coming up in August 23rd, and we've been kind of digging into the subject a little bit, but it's been popping up lately. Just curious if you had any stories or anybody that's ever come to you. It's like, hey, I was at this mound site and a UFO popped up or anything like that.
Sure. Yeah, we do. We have a lot of indigenous mounds here. Unfortunately, a lot of them were destroyed.
Yep. Same here.
Due to agriculture and stuff like that. But there are a lot that have survived, and a few of those are in Forest Hill Cemetery up in Madison here. And Forest Hill Cemetery is a reputedly haunted cemetery. And so I guess if you want a connection, there's one there, because these mounds predate the cemetery by centuries.
Yeah.
Like they were there for 1,000, 2,000 years before this cemetery was built around it in like the 19th century.
Right.
But ever since the cemetery was built, it has been accumulating these paranormal stories surrounding it, and so people will talk about, seeing a woman in white, which is a pretty common urban legend too. So I don't know how seriously to take that.
Yeah.
But they'll talk about feeling just strange feelings in different parts of the cemetery, or seeing weird mists, or similar things. And having been there, something definitely feels. Or I should say, something resonates about that place. There's a heaviness to the air out there, and I don't know if that was the case prior to the cemetery being built, and that's why the mounds are there, or maybe it's because of the mounds or something similar. Because these are burial mounds, and so there are remains in them. So I couldn't say for sure what the connection is there, but there is this real emotional weight to this place that I think people pick up on some psychic level, if nothing else. That contributes to its reputation as being haunted, because I've experienced it, and it could be that there are certain areas, like certain geographic areas that have this kind of energy to them, and that's why they're chosen as burial spots.
Totally.
Or it could be that the cumulative weight of all of the emotion that we pour into how we process and mourn death accumulates over time, and that's what we're feeling. I don't know. We can only speculate, but there's something weird about it.
Yeah, we have the Chillicothe Cemetery, which is built right on top of two ancient burial mounds in Chillicothe, Ohio. And you just walk right into that cemetery, and it's built on giant mound structure, and multiple places in Ohio where people just gravitated toward their already burial sites. It's so fascinating. They've been there forever, and then modern people come along and they put their cemetery right on top of it. It's very, very common. Believe it or not, I mean, we have those all over Ohio, and the one in Chillicothe apparently is haunted because it's a disturbed burial mound. So
interesting. Very,
very fascinating that we have a kind of a correlation in two different states of a similar phenomenon. So it's wild.
Oh, definitely. I mean, it really makes you wonder if there is some human element, like what the connection is, what's inspiring us across cultures, and vast swaths of time to bury our dead in the same place.
Yeah.
That's interesting.
It's interesting.
Yeah.
Wow.
It's like man, we wonder about these certain turtles and how do they know how to navigate and lay their eggs here, or this or that, and they're homing navigate. Maybe we have a navigation system we're not aware of.
Yeah, I'm sure.
And it's called the next step, and that's why we go to these places and these sacred sites, and people go, hey, you knew what was up. I'm going to use this site too. Maybe there's something to that. That's maybe the gateways to Passover. Who knows?
Yeah, portals, or we're drawn there energetically for something. I mean, it's all speculation.
It seems like there's a homing system built in on us to find those.
There are spots on the earth
final rest
that are just weird.
Yeah.
I mean, Ohio, pure and simple. I mean, we've got so many strange places that
it's fairly strange.
Going back to pioneer times, there's always been phenomenon in those areas.
Yeah.
And it's just it's accumulates over time where you can't discount when it's so many different areas of people coming through that area and there's story after story after story. It's hard to deny.
I always thought the most unique thing that we would ever know in our lives of growing up in Ohio, I'm not joking, was that Annie Oakley was buried down the road from us.
She was.
Where we grew up, she's buried down the road.
Yep.
So I thought this is what puts Ohio on the map forever to me. And then I've discovered so much, going out with Mike and Kyle and doing some of the stuff with Serpent Mound and going to some of these mound sites and then just peeling those layers and keep digging. And you find more and more and you're like, the Newark Holies. It just, like he's saying, like, I think you brought it to my awareness more than anything of just saying of like how strange Ohio is. Cause I'm like, again, like if I really thought about it, I was like, yeah, we got Annie Oakley. It's kind of cool. And then it's like, no, we got a ton of stuff here. Yeah. I mean, there's a lot that happened
legends. Here. It's way beyond that. It's an ancient the land of a very advanced ancient civilization. Yeah. These river valleys are majestic, we're looked over as a flyover state in Wisconsin. Very similar thing. People come to Wisconsin. Me and my dad drove through Wisconsin, Minnesota. We have family in Minnesota in St. Paul, and so we drove up through Madison all the way through to get up there, and then from the wedding in Minnesota, drove all the way across the country to another wedding in Sonoma, California. It was an amazing trip. But driving through some of those areas of Wisconsin, it is unbelievably beautiful.
Yeah, man.
I mean, unreal. This one section of highway, these bluffs, these big rock structures, these, I don't know, they're like hill, but pure granite, just looks like these rock faces and just trees everywhere.
They have a lot of trees.
It's just a vibe about Wisconsin when you drive through it. It's a beautiful state.
We have, it's because of the glaciers that moved through here, forever ago. We have these massive like moraines and things, and we don't care. We'll build a highway right through the middle of one. We'll just cut a hole in it, and then it's fine. Just don't worry about it.
Hey, nothing to see here. Don't worry about it.
I have a question, non-cryptid related or paranormal or anything, but just question. In Wisconsin, did it start in Wisconsin or Minnesota, the Juicy Lucy, the cheeseburger stuffed with the cheese in the middle?
That's St. Paul. I've been there.
Is it Minnesota?
Yeah,
it's Minnesota.
I don't think that's Wisconsin.
That
sounds like something people here would like.
It's
oh, my
St.
gosh.
Paul. Me and my dad went there.
Yeah.
The home of the Juicy Lucy.
They're delicious.
It burnt my tongue.
The cheese curds in Green Bay were amazing.
Yeah.
But
we have the best cheese curds.
Yes.
That's true.
I assume you're a Packers fan.
No, actually, I'm a Chicago Bears fan.
Oh my! And living in the holy land of Lambeau.
My family is from Illinois.
Oh,
and
gotcha.
So we moved up here when I was in grade school, but we had always been Bears fans, and I wasn't going to change.
Yeah,
all right.
Chicago's so close.
All right, we can put friendly wagers every year on the Packers Bears games now. Then I'm a lifelong Packers fan by default. If I wasn't, I think I would have been put out on the roadside and collected by the next car going by. But
the Bears might actually be good coming up. So I mean, historically, since there were a couple years, maybe 2005 and 2006, and then maybe 2010, where I would bet on the Bears. But I'm generally pretty realistic. Otherwise,
well, you got a Buckeye as your quarterback.
I was about to say you got Justin Fields. He's
got a Buckeye.
I think that kid's going to be a winner. I do. Yeah. I really do. Like anybody people want to talk about his passing stats ad nauseum, which is ridiculous because if you look at the Bears line last year, you look at their receivers. They had nothing. Like that kid was whole offense.
Oh my God.
It was like him and Cole Kmet, and like that's it.
Yep.
And so I guess Darnell Mooney is fine, but he's not a number one. He's not a number one receiver, and so I think he's going to shine now that we got DJ Moore. He can be the number one receiver. That takes a lot of pressure off Mooney. He's going to be a great guy to like stretch the field. But the fact is, Justin Fields was the entire offense. He had nobody to throw to and no time to throw it. Even if he did.
Yeah. And
so, the fact that he had so many rushing yards instead of sacks, I think tells you everything you need to know about him.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like that kid's a baller. He's going to be great.
He's a good
I hope so. And
it's good timing because now the Packers are kind of restarting and
we got
the Bears
Jordan Love coming
are on the up and coming.
I can't tell you how much I love another Hall of Fame Packers quarterback
going to the Jets. That's so weird.
Like do the Packers have a relationship with them? Because it's 2 in a row.
Yeah.
Weird.
They never want to send anybody to the, they don't want to send them to the Vikings right away. Because Favre, when he left, wanted to go to the Vikings right away.
And he did a year later.
Yeah. Right. He wanted to come back and I was a Favre fan, but I'll tell you, like, I love Rodgers too, but when you're leaving, hey, man, cool, let's go. Favre kind of held the team hostage every year, and it would affect their draft picks, and maybe I'm coming back, maybe I'm not. And it's like, dude, you're not endearing yourself to your audience here at all, like, by any means. Like, thankful for what you did for the organization and victories and exciting nights. This is one of my favorite stories. Overtime game, I'm working night shift at the ICU. Right, I got a guy in halo traction. He can't talk. No. He can't do anything. He's like literally like one of the guys from the movies, like arm up in this one, and so I'm in there like doing care. And I think it was the Bears Packers Monday Night Football game. It was like the first play of overtime, and Brett Favre was still playing, and he threw like a straight up like 70-yard bomb on the first play of overtime for this touchdown. And I start screaming in this room. I'm like, go, go, go! And all these nurses and all these PCAs come running in because they think my guy is like, dying. They think I'm screaming, and this guy is laughing, but he can't do much more than just like have bubbles come out. But he's fully there with me, and I'm like, oh my God, like this is so embarrassing. I'm a brand new nurse, and this guy's just laughing his butt off about it. And I'm like, don't tell anybody about this when you get the chance, dude.
Yeah. That's
so funny.
Nice.
But yeah, you know, you got to go when it's time to go. So we'll see what happens with the rivalry as it continues with. You got Justin Fields and Jordan Love. So
yeah. Well,
yeah,
two young
I will tell you
quarterbacks.
this, though. If the Packers somehow get fall ass backwards into a third Hall of Fame quarterback, I'm just going to give up on the NFL. I'm going to quit because it's clearly rigged. Like that has to be impossible.
So I'm 40, and the first quarterback that I remember for the Packers was Mikowski, and then he was
Magic Man.
He was up and coming, and then he got hurt, and then we had Anthony Dilwig and a couple replacements maybe, and then we got Favre, and from there it's been Favre and Rodgers really, you know, and it's talk about being spoiled. Oh God, yeah, being absolutely spoiled, but. I digress way too much on that.
Anyway.
But thank you for entertaining me on those questions.
Right. So welcome to Paranormal Sports Talk Radio.
Yeah, right. We have never talked about football probably ever on the show. So this is great. I'm glad. Hey, it happened at the end. Perfect timing.
Yeah.
It's a good way to
absolutely
to connect on.
So we'll have to make a wager somehow on these games. It'll be, you know.
Oh, for sure.
I'll figure out something. We'll set something up.
Absolutely.
It's so much fun.
Sounds good.
Yeah, and Tobias, we always kind of, let our guests know a little bit about our background. We're a video production company as well, and we always want to offer and extend any help that you guys may ever need capturing something, or we'd love to come out if you ever had a project that you were interested in doing but didn't have camera gear or audio guys or people that you had connections with to help out with something like that.
Yep.
Hit us up. Let us know. We're always looking for a cool project. We got a couple things cooking with some folks right now, but it's we're just interested in you're out there. You're getting after it. You and Emily are on the ground.
Yeah.
And those are the people that we want to connect with. So again, much love to you.
Yeah.
Thank you so much for doing the show. Thank you so much for what you're doing with Singular Fortean Society and everything that you guys have cooking over there. And, this has been great. We've had so much fun. And just let us know where we can find you. And if you want to leave our audience with anything as an outro of if you have any last words.
Sure. Well, I mean, thank you so much for having me. This has been an absolute blast. And thank you for that offer, because that is something I could potentially use. You just never know. That's so far outside of my own skill set that, as a writer especially, that's just fantastic. If people are interested in learning more about me or about what Emily and I do, you can find the Singular Fortean Society at singularfortean.com. You can also find us at pretty much every social media platform. It's always going to be at Singular Fortean. So you can find us on Facebook, Twitter, Tumblr, Instagram, TikTok. It's all at Singular Fortean. And if you're interested in any of my books, of course, you can find those through Amazon, many major book retailers, or you can buy them directly through our website as well. And if I have any last words, I suppose, it would be for anybody listening to this, just to know that there are people who do take you seriously, who aren't going to laugh at you. And I sincerely hope that if it brings you comfort, you find the courage to talk about your experiences.
Beautiful, beautiful, man. Well put.
It's a good message.
And yeah, absolutely. And once again, thank you so very much for coming on the show. Like I said, don't go anywhere. We're going to outro the show. We'll come back and we'll have a little chat post show, and we'll be right back. Tobias, once again, much love. Thank you.
See you, buddy.
Thanks.
Awesome.
Dude. That was sweet. Is your cup full?
Man, I'm telling you,
I got to ask after every show like this now.
It is, but it's getting a little easier, I think, just because of yesterday of again, doing it and just expending the brain energy, kind of stretching your mind is what it feels like, because it hurts. My head physically hurts. But it's the same way.
In a good way, because it's
in a great way.
It's moving. You're
in a great way.
Yeah, your brain chemistry is shifting all over.
Think of it the same way of I got back into doing some just light working out and exercise. And at first it's man, you do something, you go for a run or a bike, your muscles let you know that you did that. You're oh God, it hurts. Right. It hurts.
Right.
And the same with your brain. I'm not joking either, because when I did that coding program last summer, my brain hurt so bad every single day, because you're really thinking.
Yeah.
When you're at home making your breakfast that you've made all the time and you know where the forks and the spoons and the knives and the dish, you don't have to think about anything. That's why when you travel and you have to think about everything, time distorts because you're remembering everything.
Yeah.
So yeah, when we do these episodes, man, like I'm full on engaged. Like
Yeah. That was killer.
I had a thoroughly good time.
Yeah, that was awesome. Well, I think we're good to go. We're going to wrap this up, and you guys can follow us on Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, at The Strange Road. The Facebook group, Strange Road Hitchhikers, is rocking. And, you know, make sure you listen to the podcast, whether it's Apple, Spotify, Google, wherever it is. Give us a review, 5 stars or bust.
Give us a share if you like it.
Yeah, give us a share.
Share it with someone. It's free.
Wherever you listen to your podcast. If you're watching on YouTube, if you're not subscribed, please do hit that subscribe button, like that video.
Please.
And, you know, positive comments. And we're very active in our YouTube comments.
Yeah.
So if you guys reach out there or Instagram, more than likely we're going to get back to you. We try. We try very, very hard to get back to people in a timely manner. And so the YouTube premieres and the live streams are all ad-free.
Yep.
We have the super stickers and super chats, which are available on the YouTube channel now. So if you want to support, check that out. Also, we have a couple links. All the links for Tobias and Singular Fortean are in the description. Check out all of our links. We love you guys.
Check out his stuff. Check out those. Check out those articles on Singular Fortean.
100%. But we are out. Peace, love, and chicken grease.
Later, everybody.
There you go.